Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinata, Radha Gopinata, Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadramaya. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parishna Stochar Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Tagore Premanande Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, titled Vidura's Talks with Maitreya. Text number 48. Tatte vayam loka sisriksayadya Tatte vayam loka sisriksayadya Tvaya nusristas tribir atma bhisma Tvaya nusristas tribir atma bhisma Sarve viyukta savihara tantram Sarve viyukta savihara tantram Nasaknumastat pratihartavete Nasaknumastat pratihartavete Tatte vayam lokasisriksayadya Tvaya nusristas tribiratma bhisma Sarve viyukta svavihara tantra Nasaknumastat pratihartavete Tatte vayam lokasisriksayadya Tvaya nusristas tribiratma bhisma Sarve viyukta svavihara tantram Nasaknumastat pratihartavete Tvaya nusristas tribiratma bhisma Sarve viyukta savihara tantram Nasaknumastat pratihartavete Tatte vayam lokasisriksayadya Tvaya nusristas tribiratma bhisma Sarve viyukta savihara tantram Nasaknumastat pratihartavete. Word for word translation. Tat, therefore. Te, your. Vayam, all of us. Loka, world. Sisriksaya, for the sake of creation. Adya, O original person. Tvaya, by you. Anushrista, being created one after another. Tribi, by the three modes of nature. Atmabi, by one's own. Sma, in the past. Sarve, all. Viyukta, separated. Svavihara tantram, the network of activities for one's own pleasure. Na, not. Saknuma, could do it. Tat, that. Pratihartave, to avoid. Te, onto your. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. O original person, we are therefore but yours only. Although we are your creatures, we are born one after another, under the influence of the three modes of nature. And for this reason, we are separated in action. Therefore, after the creation, we could not act concertedly for your transcendental pleasure. Purport. The cosmic creation is working under the influence of the three modes of the external potency of the Lord. Different creatures are also under the same influence, and therefore they cannot act concertedly in satisfying the Lord. Because of this diverse activity, there cannot be any harmony in the material world. The best policy, therefore, is to act for the sake of the Lord. That will bring about the desired harmony. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming to Srimad Bhagavatam class today. I'll read the translation again. O O original person, we are therefore but yours only. Although we are your creatures, we are born one after another under the influence of the three modes of nature. And for this reason, we are separated in action. Therefore, after the creation, we could not act concertedly for your transcendental pleasure. So we continue on with the prayers by the demigods towards Lord Vishnu. And basically in today's verse, the demigods are praying to Vishnu that, "Oh my Lord, we're all yours, we're all born from you, we're all your servants or your parts and parcels, we're all creatures born from you. But what has happened? Now that we've come into this material world, now that we're born in this material universe, we're under the influence of the three modes of material nature. And being under the influence of these three modes of material nature, we're separated from you, and due to the contaminated consciousness, we're unable to work together as a team to serve you and to give you transcendental pleasure." And in the purport, it's a short purport today, but Prabhupada's basically just elaborating on what the translation was saying, that how everything in this material world is working under the three modes of material nature, and different living entities being influenced by different modes, they act in different ways. And in the word-for-word translation for the word Swavihara Tantram, Prabhupada translates it as the network of activities for one's own pleasure. So different living entities under influenced by different modes of nature, they're all acting for their own pleasure in different ways. And due to this, because different entities are working different ways for their own pleasure, Prabhupada explains, because of this diverse activity, there cannot be any harmony in the material world. So because every single living entity is just thinking about themselves and acting for their own sense gratification, acting for their own pleasure, Prabhupada explains, therefore in the material world, there can never be any peace and never any harmony. Then in the last line, Prabhupada gives a solution. Okay, in general, we see in the material world there's no disharmony, there's always argument, fighting, differences, because everyone is out there for themselves. Everyone is seeking just to gratify their own pleasure. So is there any way there can be actual peace and harmony in this world? Prabhupada, in the last line of the purport, he explains. And this is what the demigods are also saying. Because of the diverse activity, there cannot be any harmony in the material world. But, Prabhupada writes, the best policy, therefore, is to act for the sake of the Lord. That will bring about the desired harmony. So the solution for all the unrest and disharmony in the world, Prabhupada's explaining, is if all of us work together as a team to serve one goal, which is to give Krishna, or rather Gopinath, pleasure. If we all work together for the sake of giving Krishna pleasure, then we'll find actual peace and harmony in the world. So that's what Prabhupada's explained in the purport today. And so we'll discuss a bit about this point. When I read this verse, two things came to mind from what I've read in other places. One was that famous section from 4th canto of the Prachetas. If you'll notice in that section, the Prachetas, they were the sons of King Prachina Barishat. And this king, he wanted his sons to take over the kingdom. But he understood that before they can be proper kings and rulers, they need to go and do some tapasya. So he sent them out to do tapasya. These 4 sons, called the Prachetas, they go out to do tapasya. And along the way, they happen to meet Lord Shiva. So Prabhupada, he explains that whenever a certain soul or a jiva in this material world, they become serious about self-realization, then Krishna arranges things in such a way that they bump into one of his pure devotees. So in that way, their spiritual advancement will continue. Same thing we see with Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj, he went out to the forest seeking Vishnu. And then Narad Muni, he bumps into him. So how does this happen? Again, Prabhupada explains the same thing in his purports in that section, that whenever Krishna, he sees that there's a soul sincerely looking for his shelter, sincerely looking for answers, then Krishna will make arrangements that somehow or other that soul will bump into another devotee of the Lord. And we see this like every day whenever we go out on books. Sometimes many times, nearly every day, we'll meet someone who would say, "Oh, how did you pick me? How did you pick me? How did you find me?" You know, they'll say that, "Just recently I was wanting to get into this, just recently I was seeking answers, and now suddenly you come to me, a monk, and giving me these books. How did this happen?" So this is all Krishna acting, that whenever he sees a sincere soul seeking his shelter, Krishna arranges for his devotees to go. So this is the mercy of Prabhupada, that Prabhupada has given us this fortune to do the same job that Narayana Muni, Lord Shiva are doing. We see in Bhagavatam, Prabhupada is giving their book distributors, the preachers, the same opportunity to do this very confidential service. So the pracharyas are going out to do tapasya, and they meet Lord Shiva, and the Lord Shiva instructs them in devotional service, and he teaches them some prayers to offer at the lotus feet of Krishna. And the pracharyas, they take instruction and they go and they do tapasya underwater. And after many years, thousands of years, finally they get darshan of Lord Vishnu. And what is the first thing that Vishnu says to the pracharyas when Vishnu gives them darshan? The first thing he says is that I'm very much pleased by the friendly dealings amongst all four of you. All four of you, although you're four individual souls, although you're separate souls, you're all working together for the same goal in devotional service. And due to your mutual friendly dealings, I'm very much pleased and want to obey you. So that purport we'll go through today. It's very nice, Prabhupada explaining or elaborating furthermore about friendship amongst devotees, how we should all work together as a team for the one purpose or one goal of satisfying Krishna, to give Krishna transcendental pleasure. So it's a very nice verse in purport we can go through. The second thing that came to mind when I was reading this is, long time ago, when I was like a brand new bhakta, I was reading one of those introductory books called Journey of Self-Discovery. It's like similar to Science of Self-Realization. In that book there's one chapter called Spiritual Solutions to Material Problems. And in that chapter there's one conversation or one lecture Prabhupada gives. I think it's in Boston. Prabhupada is giving one lecture, 1969. And he's giving this lecture to a international student society. So I think it's at some university in Boston. And there's this group called the International Student Society. And Prabhupada's whole lecture is just on the same theme, about how to create global unity. And that whole section of that lecture transcript, which is there in that book, when I first read that hit me, or that struck me so much that it created such a big samsara. Even till now, that purport or that lecture by Prabhupada is still in my mind. When I was reading this, immediately I was thinking of what Prabhupada was writing there. So that's the beauty of Prabhupada's books, that many times we read Prabhupada's books and some things will just strike us so much and create such powerful samskaras that even after many, many years, we might have just read it once, but even after many, many years, it will still be fresh in our mind. So in that lecture that Prabhupada was giving to this International Student Society at some university in Boston, Prabhupada was explaining that how, okay, you're the International Student Society, so you want, international peace, harmony, and Prabhupada's giving the example of the United Nations. That, okay, we have this United Nations. What is the purpose of this United Nations? Is to get all the nations together, all working peacefully together for the sake of, peace and harmony in the world. But Prabhupada is saying, instead we're seeing the opposite result happening. Instead of the world being more united, the world is becoming more and more separated. And what's the evidence of this? Prabhupada explains that every year we see that the flags in the United Nations, they're increasing. Which means what? Which means different countries, they're separating into smaller countries due to disharmony amongst them. So in this way, Prabhupada is explaining that the flags in the United Nations are increasing every year, and this shows that actually your attempt to create peace and harmony in the world is a failure. Why is it a failure? Prabhupada gives two very nice analogies to explain to these students. Why is it that all these material solutions you're trying to make up to create peace and harmony, why isn't it working? Prabhupada says if you go on the bank of some lake or nice river and you take a stone and you throw the stone into the pond or into the lake, then the stone will fall into the water and then there'll be like a ripple, like a circle, you will see, and the ripple effect will go all the way to the bank of the lake. And then if you throw a second stone, then wherever the second stone lands, it also creates another ripple and another circle will expand. And the stone number one, the ripple from the stone number one and the ripple from the stone number two, they'll expand until they collide with each other. And Prabhupada is explaining that because different nations, they have their own interests, they all overlap or collide with each other, and therefore there's disinterest, disharmony amongst them. One particular nation has one particular agenda, one particular desires, or one particular focus they want to focus on. And another nation, another society, they have another agenda. And due to this difference of agenda, difference of desires, there's overlapping of their desires, and then there's collision, and then there's disrest and disharmony. So is there any way that there can be actual harmony? Prabhupada explains, yes. If stone number 1 and if stone number 2, they fall in exactly the same spot on the pond, then the two ripples that are expanding in the water, they won't collide with each other, they won't overlap. Another example Prabhupada gives is if you take a compass and you draw a circle. If the point of the circle, of circle number 1, circle number 2 is in exactly the same spot, then the two circles will never collide or never overlap each other. If the center of circle 1 and circle 2 is in different spots, then the two circles, they will overlap each other. So Prabhupada explains that, explaining to these students that the only way you can get peace and harmony is if you have one common goal. If the goal of nation 1, nation 2, nation 3, or community 1, society 2, if all different people have one goal, one focus, and they're all working towards that one goal, one center, then you can get real peace and harmony. And what is that one goal which will give real peace and harmony? Prabhupada explains that's Krishna, according to the Shastras. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, Ya Shastra Vidim Utsrija Vartate Kamakarta Nasa Siddhim Avapnoti Nas Haktum Nasi. Still last name? Ya Shastra Vidim Utsrija Vartate Kamakarta Nasa Siddhim Navapnoti Nas Sukham Na Param Gatim. So in the last chapter of the Gita, Krishna explains that if one doesn't act according to the Shastras and instead whimsically acts according to his own desires, then what is the result of that? He won't get perfection, he won't get happiness, and he won't attain the supreme destination. So according to Krishna in the Gita, the only way people in this world can be happy if they follow the injunctions of the Shastras. And Prabhupada explains that according to the Shastras, that one center upon which everyone should focus on is Krishna. Unless where every single person is focusing on Krishna, all working together as a team to give Krishna pleasure, there cannot be any peace, there cannot be happiness. And Prabhupada further on is elaborating in this lecture to these students that, okay, you have this international society, or you have the United Nations, and you want to unite all the nations. And then Prabhupada, he asked the students this question, that what is your definition of a nation? What is a nation supposed to do? Okay, definition of nation is anyone who's born in that particular country, he's known as that. Like for Australia, anyone who's born in Australia, they're considered as Australians. And the Australian government will try and benefit all those persons born in Australia. But Prabhupada explains, there is one fault in your current definition of, or the way you act in terms of your countries and cities. Prabhupada says if the definition of a nation is whoever is born in that nation, they're a citizen of that nation, then what about the animals? Aren't the animals, the bugs, the birds and the beasts, aren't they also born in this country? So they're also the citizens of Australia. So it's not that only the humans born in Australia, it's not that only they're Australians, but even the birds, the animals, they should also be taken care of. They're also the citizens of this nation. So in this way, Prabhupada points out, this is one of the faults with your current way of how you're ruling things. Because you neglect the animals. The animals are also citizens of the land. They're also born in the same land, according to your definition. So they should be also taken care of. But instead, what are you guys doing? You guys are sending thousands and millions of animals into slaughterhouses and mercilessly killing them. So Prabhupada explains that this is not fair, this is not just. And the reason there's these problems you guys are having, for example, not taking care of animals, this problem, that problem, is because you've missed the proper center of all your activities. Because you're not keeping Krishna in the center and acting for Krishna's pleasure, all these different problems are happening. As soon as you put Krishna in the center, Prabhupada explains, then all these apparent problems you're going through in the world, either on a small level, larger level, international level, all these problems will be solved. And Prabhupada, in reference to the animals, Prabhupada, he further goes on to explain that, okay, if you put Krishna in the center, then automatically one will start seeing all living entities, not just human beings, but even animals, the birds and beasts, as all part and parcel of Krishna. Prabhupada quotes that verse, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavi Hastini Sunis Cheva Sapakecha Pandita Samadarshana. That the devotee of the Lord, by virtue of transcendental knowledge, he sees the soul in the hearts of all living entities. In this way, he sees everyone equally, he treats everyone equally and nicely. And Prabhupada says, just see how wonderful this process of bhakti is. If one brings Krishna to center, then his feeling of love expands to such a great extent. Prabhupada explains, when we're a small child, he goes back to the analogy of the pond. When you throw a stone in the pond, then the stone will land into the water, and then the force of that will create a ripple. And initially the circle will be small, then slowly with time the circle will expand more and more and more until it will hit the bank of the lake. So Prabhupada is explaining that all of us, we have this dormant loving propensity in our heart. And initially when we're a small child, it's just all about ourselves. We're just thinking our world is just based on us. We're just thinking of how to satisfy our own stomach or what toy will give us pleasure. But as we slowly grow up, that circle of love expands. Then instead of thinking just about ourselves, we start thinking about our parents, we start thinking about brothers, we start thinking about our friends at school, then we start thinking about our community. Then slowly, with more time, that feeling of love expands for the nation. Then we start thinking in terms of, okay, I'm an Australian, I need to act as a proper Australian for the sake of my country. Then it can expand to the whole world, that we start thinking for world peace and this and that. But Prabhupada explains that our real loving propensity can expand to the maximum limit only when one takes to bhakti. How? But Prabhupada explains, when one takes to bhakti, then one sees everyone as part and parcel of Krishna, then one not only treats other human beings with respect and love, but one also treats animals, birds, even the most insignificant creatures like ants and bugs, one even treats them with love and respect. So in this way, Prabhupada explains, one loving propensity can extend or maximize to the fullest extent only when one takes shelter of Krishna, only when one puts Krishna as the center of their life. And Prabhupada, he quotes one verse from the 7th canto. Prabhupada explains how in 7th canto, in Narad Muni's instructions to Maharaj Yudhishthira, in those instructions, Maharaj Yudhishthira is asking what is the different duties for different varnas and ashramas. So Narad Muni will go on to describe the duties of a brahmachari, then we go on to describe the duties of a grahastha, sannyasi, vanaprastha, and so on. So in that chapter where Narad Muni is describing about the duties of a grahastha, Narad Muni explains that one of the duties of a grahastha is, before he takes prasad, he should make sure that any other persons around in the neighborhood, if they're hungry, he should feed them first. Then Narad Muni goes on to explain, not just human beings, but even if there's any animals around the area, and Narad Muni even goes on to say, even if there's a snake in the house, even if one finds a snake in the house or in their backyard, still the householder, before he takes his lunch, he should go and feed that snake prasad before he himself honors. And Prabhupada uses this quote from 7th canto to explain, just see how great is bhakti. That by taking shelter of Krishna, by keeping Krishna in the center, one's loving propensity expands so much that one won't even eat his own lunch before feeding even a snake. That's how great a devotee's love expands, that he'll, before eating prasad, if he sees a snake, he'll even feed the snake before taking prasad himself. And we see many examples of this with the devotees of Lord. Classical example is Mrigari. Initially he was half killing animals and watching, and he was taking pleasure in that. Pleasure in animals half killed, suffering and slowly dying. But after taking to the path of bhakti, later on we see, when Narad Muni is coming, he's offering his dandavats to his Guru Maharaj. But as he's offering dandavats, he notices there's some ants on the ground. And he's slowly, with his dhoti, he's pushing the ants to the side so he might not hurt these ants. So this is how soft a devotee's heart can become, by the practice of bhakti. So in this way, Prabhupada, he glorifies bhakti. In this way, Prabhupada, he establishes that real peace, real unity, real harmony in this world can only happen when we keep Krishna in the center. When we keep Krishna in the center, then one's loving propensity can expand to the fullest, and one can actually deal properly with all living entities, not just humans, but even the animals, the birds and the beasts. And another time, I was remembering yesterday, I read one Prabhupada Leela. One time, a reporter think it was in Philadelphia. So many times Prabhupada, he will go to a particular country or particular city, like in America, there will be many reporters coming to interview Prabhupada. So in this particular place, I think in Philadelphia, one particular reporter, he comes up to Prabhupada and starts challenging Prabhupada. At this time, there was some heat in the news about the Hare Krishna's view on women and things like that. So this reporter was challenging Prabhupada that, Swamiji, we've heard that there's some thoughts that your Hare Krishna movement is sexist. And not only sexist, but your Hare Krishna movement is also considered to be racist because of some comments in your books about women and some comments in your books about black people. Like this, the reporter challenges Prabhupada. And it's very nice how Prabhupada very calmly and coolly, very nicely, logically responds back to his reporter. Prabhupada explains to his reporter, no, actually, on the spiritual level, we're all equal. And on the spiritual level, we're all given equal opportunity to practice devotional service. But on the mature level, obviously there'll be differences. Prabhupada explains on the bodily level, on the mature level, naturally no two persons are the same. On the bodily level, okay, naturally there'll be one master, there'll be one servant. Naturally there'll be one father, one son, or one male, one woman. Naturally there'll be one person from one country, another person from another country. Naturally there'll be one person speaking one particular language, another person speaking another particular language. So on the mature level, you can't get real equality. On the mature level, everyone is different, and that's just a fact of life. You can't change that. You can't say, okay, everyone become a master. No, there has to be some leaders, some higher person in society, and there has to be some persons working under them. You can't say, okay, everyone just be the same gender. No, naturally there'll be some male and some female. You can't say, okay, everyone has to be an elderly person and no one can be young. No. Naturally there has to be some elderly persons, some persons have to be in middle age, some persons have to be young, some have to be babies. So these are natural differences, and that's just a fact of life. That's just the way the world is. On a material level, everyone is different. You can't get real equality on the material level. But on a spiritual level, we're all equal. In this way, Prabhupada, he nicely explains to the reporter and also the devotees. Prabhupada explains, furthermore, that like you take our temple. In our temple, Prabhupada explains, we have so many different devotees from all around the world. But it's not that only some persons from one particular class or society, only those particular devotees are having a good time enjoying, and these other devotees from another class or another background, they're not enjoying. Prabhupada is saying, no, all the devotees in the temple, they're all equally enjoying and relishing Krishna consciousness, regardless of their background, where they come from, regardless of their gender or the society. So in this way, Prabhupada explains that on a spiritual level, we're all given equal opportunity. On the spiritual level, Krishna, he doesn't judge us based on our background, what body we have, and things like that. And Prabhupada further explains that, I myself, I accept all disciples from everywhere. I don't say, okay, you're from this country, you can't be my disciple. I don't say, okay, you're this color, you can't be my disciple. I don't say, okay, you're a woman, you can't be my disciple. I accept everyone as my disciple. So in this way, Prabhupada, he very nicely explains that on a mature level, you can never get equality. That's why we're finding that all these material solutions people are trying to come up with, like the United Nations and different things, none of them are actually solving the real problem of the world in terms of peace and harmony. Because, as Prabhupada is explaining, on the material level, you can't get real equality. There will always be differences. The only way you can get actual equality amongst different people is when you come to the spiritual platform. Just like Albert Einstein, he said that a problem can never be solved on its own level. One needs to rise to a higher level to solve a problem. So that higher level is spiritual consciousness. Only when one comes to that spiritual platform, then one can actually see real equality in society. One can see everyone as the soul, and this way properly deal with different persons. Another place in third canto, Prabhupada explains that seeing everyone equally doesn't mean that we deal with everyone equally. We can see everyone equally in the sense that everyone is part and parcel of Krishna, everyone is servant of Krishna, but at the same time, we associate with different persons based on their level. And Prabhupada, he gives the example, just like a lion. Okay, we understand there's a soul in the lion, we understand the soul in the lion is a devotee of Krishna, but that doesn't mean that we go to the lion and embrace the lion, saying, okay, this lion is a devotee of Gopinath, okay, I go embrace him. No, Prabhupada says, on one hand, the devotee, he sees real equality, he sees everyone as part and parcel of Krishna, but at the same time, he relates or deals with different entities based on their level. So although a lion, okay, he's also a devotee of Krishna, he also has a swarup in Vrindavan, still it's not proper for us to go and embrace the lion. So according to different persons, the devotee will relate to them in different ways. In the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, there's one nice verse which explains how we should relate with different persons. Ishwaresu tad adineshu balesu dusatsucha prema maitri kripotpeksham yak karoti samajjama. So in this verse, it I think comes in the Uddhava Gita section, it's explained how a devotee of the Lord, a Madhyamadikari, how he deals with 4 different personalities in 4 different ways. One is, for the Supreme Lord, one engages in loving service, prema. So one worships the Lord with prema, love and devotion. And with devotees of the Lord, he develops friendship with them. Then the third type of personalities are the innocent, general mass of people in the public. For them, kripa, he gives them compassion. So being merciful unto them, he tries to bring them closer to Krishna. And the 4th type of person is those who are envious of Krishna and the devotees. And for them, the way he should deal with them, Bhagavatam explains, Krishna explains, is upeksha, that he should neglect them or avoid their association, keep a distance. Later on in the Bhagavatam, the Prabhupada disciples, they'll quote one quote by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, further explaining why is it that the Shastras explain for envious persons we should avoid them and keep a distance. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, he explains that the reason we should avoid envious persons is because the goal of a devotee is that he wants to bring everyone closer to Krishna. So that's the goal of every single devotee. He loves Krishna and he wants to share that love with everyone. He sees everyone out there suffering due to lack of Krishna consciousness. So he wants to bring everyone closer and closer to Krishna's lotus feet. Now what happens if you go and preach to an envious person, then that envious person, Prabhupada explains, is just like giving milk to a serpent. You try and do good to a snake by feeding him milk, but what does that do? Instead of the snake being pacified and going away, not harming you, the snake will get more strength, and with that regenerated strength, the snake will still come and bite you. So in this way, Prabhupada explains, or Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj explains, that if you go and preach to an envious person, what will happen is that instead of him being pacified and coming closer to Krishna, he will go further away from Krishna. How? You will just anger him more. Because they're so envious of Krishna, whenever they hear more and more about Krishna, instead of that love evoking, they will just become more frustrated and more angry. And by our words, we will make these envious persons speak more blasphemy of Krishna. We will make these envious persons to continue doing more offenses to Krishna's lotus feet. And by making them do more offenses, by making them do more blasphemy at the lotus feet of Krishna, what are we doing? Instead of bringing them closer to Krishna, we're making them come further away from Krishna. So we're actually doing the opposite. We're having the opposite result of what we actually want. So that's why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj explains, for envious persons, those who don't want to hear about Krishna, just leave them. Just let them go. In the future, maybe after some calamity happens in the life, after they come to senses, okay, then at that time we can go and preach to them, give them instruction. But in general, for envious persons, we leave them alone, because if we try to preach to them, the result will be, instead of making them coming closer to Krishna, they'll just go further away from Krishna, because they'll get more angered, they'll get more envious, they'll speak more blasphemy about Krishna and the devotees, and they'll commit more offenses, and in this way they'll go even further away from Krishna. So that's why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj explains that devotees, when they neglect envious persons, it's not that the devotees are being cold-hearted or mean or not showing compassion, but actually by neglecting them, they're showing compassion. Because they're understanding the only way I can save these persons is just by keeping a distance. If I go close to them, they'll just commit more and more offenses. So a devotee, he shows, although it's said a devotee neglects envious persons, that neglect is actually a devotee's compassion on the envious persons. So in this way, in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, Krishna explains how a devotee, although he sees everyone on an equal platform, although he sees the soul in everyone's heart, he still deals or associates with different persons according to that person's level. And going back to the point of Prabhupada about the power of bhakti, or the power of putting Krishna in the center. How by putting Krishna in the center, one's love and affection extends to such an effect that one even starts thinking about the benefit of even the animals and the most insignificant creatures. Yesterday I was reading one nice story in relation to this in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. There's a conversation between Haridas Thakur and one Smarta Brahmana. And it's explained in Chaitanya Bhagavat that during Mahaprabhu's time in Navadvip, at that time, people were so, although they were like pious in one sense, but they were like so ritualistic. And when the devotees, they used to chant Hare Krishna, all the devotees, they used to very loudly have kirtans at night time and do sadhu sangha, kirtan, sankirtan at night. All these karmis and karmakanda kind of people, smarta brahmanas, everyone in Navadvip, they used to criticize all the pure devotees of the Lord. And they would speak such blasphemy, they would say things like very insulting things to the devotees. They would say that, okay, this is the Chaturmasya period, so this is the 4 months of the rainy season, and these devotees, so-called devotees of the Lord, they don't understand that during Chaturmasya, Vishnu is sleeping. And by their loud chanting, they're disturbing Mahavishnu's sleep, or they're disturbing Garbhodakshaya Vishnu's sleep. And due to this offense at the lotus feet of Vishnu, there can be severe natural disasters in Navadvip. And then another Smarta Brahmana or another Karmakanda person will again challenge that if there is a drought due to this loud chanting, of these devotees, and if the price of the rice goes higher and higher, then I will go and I will personally beat down these devotees. In this way, all these persons in Navadvip, they were like so blinded by Karmakanda, by all these ritualistic injunctions of the Vedas, that they were committing such great blasphemy amongst the devotees. Another person would say that, okay, it's understandable in Ekadasi we should chant Hare Krishna, but why daily chant Hare Krishna? It's only once, in every 2 weeks. On the auspicious day of Ekadasi, it's given, one should chant Hare Krishna, one should loudly have kirtan. But this daily chanting of Hare Krishna is just a nuisance, it's just creating havoc in our society. We should do something, we should beat down these devotees. Like this, there was such, when I was reading, I was like shocked, like 500 years ago during Mahaprabhu's time, such heavy criticism was going on. And devotees, they had to tolerate so much. So this criticism against the Hare Krishna movement has been there since time immemorial. Chaitanya Bhagavat explains that actually these so-called brahmanas, they're actually demons in disguise of brahmanas. And Chaitanya Bhagavat, it even quotes from some Purana, where it's explained that in Kali Yuga, demons will be born in a family of brahmanas. And being born in brahmana families, being uncultured and not actually qualified to be brahmanas, still they will take advantage of their birth as brahmanas, and in this way they will harass people. And those of us who've been to India, we might have had experience of this, so-called brahmanas harassing people for money and this and that. So these so-called brahmanas and other persons in Navadvip, you can see how crooked and how crazy their consciousness was. They were putting forward so much heavy insults for the devotees. And the devotees, they were pained at heart. They weren't feeling pain in the sense that they were insulted, but they were feeling compassionate upon these souls. Generally, for an ordinary person, when they will hear such heavy words, then, we'll feel like so hurt, like, oh man, like, that's heavy, But for devotees of the Lord, they don't feel honor and dishonor. So the pain that the devotees of Mahaprabhu were going through was not pain at their honor being insulted, was the pain of seeing how blinded these persons had become by the rituals mentioned in the Vedas. And they were feeling compassion that they had this human form of life, they're born in this holy place of Navadvip. They could perfect their life and go back home, back to God. But instead they're wasting their life just on these stupid rituals. So in this way, the devotees of Lord were feeling compassionate. So this way, Chaitanya Bhagavat explains how the mood of actual devotee should be. Generally explained, like in the 11th canto, it's explained in the section of the Avanti Brahmana. After this Avanti Brahmana, he takes sannyas. It's mentioned that this Avanti Brahmana was going through a same kind of ordeal. Different persons in society, they used to blaspheme this Avanti Brahmana. People used to throw stones at this Avanti Brahmana. There were even persons who used to pass foul air and urinate on this Avanti Brahmana. So in this way, this Avanti Brahmana was tortured in so many different ways by this Avanti Brahmana. And in this section, Krishna, he explains to Uddhava that more painful than actual arrows that pierce one's body is the pain of the sharp arrows that come from the mouth of another person, and those sharp arrows that insult another person. So Krishna, he explains to Uddhava that when someone insults another person, the pain from that insult is actually considered to be even more painful than a physical arrow coming and piercing your heart. But the devotees we see in Mahaprabhu's time, they were so transcendent elevated, they were not even a slight bit, insulted or pained by these insults. But their pain was just seeing their fallen condition of these souls. So like this, there was one particular Brahmana who was challenging Haridas Thakur, that why are you devotees always chanting Hare Krishna? Why are you always loudly chanting? You should be chanting silently in your mind. Why you loudly chant and disturb everyone in the neighborhood? Then Haridas Thakur, he explains, we loudly chant because it's explained in the Shastras that if you loudly chant the holy name of the Lord, then one gets the benefit of 100 times more than silently chanting the holy name of the Lord. One gets 100 times more benefit than any other process mentioned in the Shastras. So in this way, Haridas Thakur, he gives reference from some Puranas where it's mentioned that if one loudly chants the holy name of the Lord, the result one will get is 100 times more than silently chanting the holy name of the Lord. So in this way, Haridas Thakur, he responds back. Then this Brahmana again, he challenges. Okay, you're saying that 100 times benefit. Why is it 100 times more? Why is it that loudly chanting, you get so much more benefit? What is the reason? Then Haridas Thakur explains this point. The reason the Shastras explain one gets more benefit by chanting loudly is because when one chants silently, he's only benefiting himself. He's only working for the benefit of his own liberation. But when one chants loudly, then all those persons around in that vicinity who are hearing the holy name, not just humans, but even the birds, the beasts, the animals, the bugs, whatever living entities are in that area that hear the holy name of the Lord, they are also benefiting. And Krishna, he becomes more pleased by this, because he is seeing that this devotee, by his devotional service, not only is he benefiting himself, but by his chanting, he's benefiting, all these bugs, he's benefiting all these animals and all these other persons in the environment. So Krishna, being pleased with that this devotee is not only acting for his own benefit, but is acting for the benefit of so many other living creatures, he gives that devotee even more benefit, 100 times more. So in this way, Haridas Thakur, he explains to this Brahmana. And then this Brahmana, naturally being so envious, he still doesn't take heed to Haridas Thakur's instructions, and then again he challenges back that you're just a pretender, you're just making up all this. Where is it mentioned in the Shastras? This is nowhere mentioned in the Vedas. If it is true that chanting loudly is 100 times more benefit, if I find this to be false, then I'm going to cut off your nose. So in this way he insults Haridas Thakur and goes away. But Haridas Thakur, again, like the other devotees, he is beyond honor and dishonor. He doesn't feel any pain at heart. If there is any pain he feels feeling pity or compassion on the fallen condition of this Brahmana. Later on, due to the insult, this Brahmana, he actually gets leprosy and his nose actually falls off. So this is one lesson we can again learn, that this is the power of bhakti. That devotee, just by his own practice of bhakti, not only does he benefit himself, but he benefits the rest of the world. He even benefits the animals, the birds and the beasts. And another lesson we learn, obviously, is how as devotees we should maintain that compassionate mood and not go beyond honor and dishonor. Like in Uddhava Gita class this Saturday, Ghanshyam Prabhu, we were going through one of the 24 gurus that the Brahmana is seeing, and one of those 24 gurus the Brahmana observes is a little child. And the lesson he learns from that little child, he observes that this little child, he is oblivious to his surroundings. He's just focused in just simple things, like simple toys, simple little things in his life. He's just happy and satisfied with that. And this little child, he doesn't understand what's honor and what's dishonor. Just like a little child, 3 years old, 3 years old, you can tease him, you can insult him, but because his level of consciousness is at a low level, he doesn't understand what's honor and what's dishonor. And just like for us, if someone says something bad to us, then naturally, the conditioned tendency is that we'll will stick to our mind, and there'll be a little grudge. Okay, this devotee said this to me, he hurt my feelings. But for a little child, you can tease him, you can say anything to him. He doesn't take it to heart. He's just very cool and detached. So this is one thing he observed with this little child, that he's beyond honor and dishonor. He's not worried about his family. He's not worried about money, this and that. So this is one because we see in a congregation, there's so many little kids. So when we observe them, we can remember this, that we should be like those kids. We should be like little innocent, simple kids of Radha Gopinath. So some time ago, Toshan Krishna Prabhu, he was quoting one lecture by Gaur Govinda Maharaj, saying that a Vaishnava is one who's simple. This is one number one characteristic of a Vaishnava is simplicity. So that simplicity we can learn from little children. They don't get affected so much by honor, dishonor. Their mind is not so much worried, about money, about this issue or that issue. They're just simply happy and satisfied just with the simple things of life. Just you give them little toy, you just give them little food, and they're just happy and satisfied. So in this way, this Brahmana observes and he learns that just like this little child, he's satisfied just with small, simple things, and his mind is not so complicated to get overcome by honor, dishonor. His mind is not so much complicated to worry about, what will happen to my family, what will happen to my business, what will happen to money, this and that. He's just focused on the present simple things. In the same way the Brahmana advises, in the same way I should be Atma Rama. I should be self-satisfied. I should be satisfied just in the simple things of chanting Hare Krishna. I should be satisfied just in the simple things of reading Bhagavatam. Why should I get so much worried about my family, about this issue, that issue? Let me just absorb myself in simple things and not get so much affected by honor, dishonor, and all these different things. So practical example of this, like we're discussing, we see in Chaitanya Leela by the devotees of the Lord. So in this way, it's very nicely explained in the Shastras by Prabhupada, how when one puts Krishna in the center, then everything works out. Then one can actually work in true harmony and unity with others, and loving propensity is expanded to a full limit. And if we can practice or endeavor in this way, then Krishna is very pleased, as we're discussing with the Prachetas. The first thing Krishna tells the Prachetas is that I'm very pleased by your friendly dealings. I'm pleased how you're all working together as a team in serving me. If we do this, then we can qualify to go back to the spiritual world. Because in the spiritual world, all the devotees are all working together to give Krishna pleasure. For example, if we take the Gopas as an example, I was listening to one lecture by my Guru Maharaj who was explaining how when the cowherd boys, they would go wandering into the forest, different cowherd boys, they would take charge of different directions to protect Krishna. Last week we were hearing how one of the symbols on Krishna's lotus feet is of the 8-pointed star. And the 8-pointed star represents that for a devotee of the Lord that takes shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, Krishna will protect that devotee in all the 8 directions. But in Vrindavan, they don't see Krishna as God. They don't see Krishna as Supreme Personal Godhead. They just see Krishna as their beloved friend, or as their beloved son, or as their beloved lover. So the cowherd boys, they're thinking of Krishna's protection. They're thinking of Krishna's pleasure. So my Guru Maharaj explained, the Acharyas explained, whenever the cowherd boys will go wandering into the forest, different cowherd boys, they would take charge of different directions. So it's explained in 10 different directions, 10 different cowherd boys will protect Krishna. So what are the 10 different directions? Obviously we have 8 directions, north, south, east, west, and then northeast, southwest, southeast. So those are the 8 directions around. So there'll be one particular cowherd boy on each of the different sides of Krishna as they will go wandering, keeping a lookout for Krishna's safety. And the extra 2 directions is one up and one down. So for the upper direction, there will be a 9th cowherd boy holding an umbrella over Krishna's head to protect Krishna from the sun. And for the downward direction, there will be a cowherd boy going in front of Krishna, clearing the path. So as Krishna will walk, to protect Krishna from any thorns and anything on the floor, there will be one cowherd boy in front of Krishna, clearing the ground as Krishna is walking, to protect Krishna in the downward direction. So in this way, the Acharyas explain how in the spiritual world, all the cowherd boys, they're all acting as a team for Krishna's protection in all the 10 different directions. Then there will be an 11th cowherd boy, and he'll be like the leader of all these other cowherd boys. And he will observe from a distance how everything is going, and he will be coordinating the whole group activity of protecting Krishna. Another example we see in Krishna book is Krishna and the cowherd boys, they will go and play in the forest. Then after some time they'll get tired, and then Krishna and Balaram, they will come to take rest, take an afternoon nap under a tree. And when the cowherd boys, they would see, okay, Krishna and Balaram are tired and they want to take a nap, then immediately some of the cowherd boys, they all rush together to create a nice soft bed for Krishna and Balaram. And some of the cowherd boys, they'll be very expert at doing this. So different cowherd boys, they would come together and very quickly they'll get some nice soft twigs and leaves and branches and barks and create a nice forest bed under a tree for Krishna and Balaram to nicely take rest. Then there'll be other cowherd boys that will come and massage Krishna and Balaram. And then there'll be another cowherd boy that will go to the river Yamuna and fetch some nice, fresh, sweet river water from Yamuna to give Krishna and Balaram to satisfy them of their thirst. Then there'll be some other cowherd boys that while Krishna and Balaram will be taking rest on the lap of another cowherd boy, there'll be other cowherd boys that would sing nice sweet songs. So in this way, again, Prabhupada's explaining Krishna book, how different cowherd boys, they have their own strengths, their own abilities, and they will engage those abilities to give Krishna pleasure. Some of them will be expert in making nice beds, so they would come quickly and make a nice bed for Krishna. Others, they'll be good at massaging, so they'll massage. Others, they will go to fetch water. And then there'll be others that would fan Krishna. And then there'll be others that would sing nicely for Krishna. So there'll be some cowherd boys are expert at singing, so they will sing nicely for Krishna. And others, they will give Krishna their legs as a pillow for Krishna and Balaram to relax. So in this way, we're seeing different devotees, they're acting in different ways for the pleasure of Krishna. So if we, following in the footsteps of Vrajvasi, if we all work together nicely in this way, here in this material world, we can practice working together to serve Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, keeping their pleasure in mind. Then Prabhupada explains, we can go back to the spiritual world and as the Gopas or Gopis, as one of the residents of Vrindavan, we can engage there in serving Krishna. Okay, we'll stop here, just on time. Is there any questions or comments before we finish? Okay, we'll stop here. Nantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagurusha Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Pramanande.